the cold and the snow. So I've always really wanted to have superpowers, and I feel like this is probably the third message that I've begun this way in my time speaking, because I just really love superheroes and everything. Ever since I was really little, and I would watch the 90s X-Men cartoon with the super cool theme song, I've wanted the ability to be able to run super fast, or I wanted the ability to be able to teleport, or I wanted to be able to shoot optic beams. That's what Cyclops does. If you have no idea what that is, that's okay. The science behind it is really weird. But it seemed like the only superpower that I ever got, the only one that ever manifested for me, was just losing a lot at sports. And I don't know if that's a superpower, but I was really good at it. So I think that was it. That was my ability that I got. However, there was someone else also loses at sports sometimes, and I'm glad I'm not alone. Some of us have to do it, so that those of you who are good can win. However, there was one superpower that I thought about and that I fantasized about all the time. This was the one that I really, really, really wanted. And it's one that maybe you can relate to and that you've wanted as well. And that was the ability to time travel. Now, this is a dangerous power, of course, if it fell into the wrong hands. But imagine that. When I was really young, just being able to go back in time and fix the things that went wrong, that was the dream. That was amazing. To go back in time and to fix that test that you didn't do well on. Or to make that joke that you just missed the opportunity to make. You thought about it 3 days later, you're I should have said that. Or maybe to not make that joke if you did make a joke that you shouldn't have. To go back in time and not disrespect your parents and get in trouble. To go back in time and talk to that girl or that boy that you missed the chance to. Or once again, to go back in time and maybe not talk to that girl or that boy that you shouldn't have talked to, right? That's the power that I wanted. And I thought it would have been so cool to be able to travel through time. Unfortunately, though, and I think we're all aware of this, there is no way to travel back in time. We're always moving forward, and we're always moving forward at the same speed. Unless you're in middle school, because that takes an eternity. That takes 100 years. But everything else is at the same speed, right? All time is traveling the same for everybody. So maybe we cannot go back in time and fix the mistakes of the past. And that's a bummer, because I would have gone back in time and told myself not to drive my friends to the drive-ins when I wasn't allowed to, and then I wouldn't have been grounded for much of when I was 16 years old. But what if I told you that maybe we don't have the power to go back in time and change things? But what if I told you that we do have the power to predict the future? What if I told you that? And I have that power, and you have that power. We all have that power. But as with a lot of powers in movies and comics, there's a catch. And the catch is that you and we have the power to predict the future with pretty good accuracy, but we can only do it for other people. We can't do it for ourselves. We can't see it for ourselves, but we can look at other people's lives and the direction that other people's lives are heading, and we kind of know where it's going to end up. We look at it and we're I see where that path's heading. But we look at our own and we're I don't know, I've got no idea what's going on. I think that's what we want to talk about in this series. And so that's why the series, if you want to put up the art, is Predicting 2019. So we're going to talk this morning about how we can predict the future in other people's lives. And maybe, just maybe, we can learn how to do it for ourselves. So good morning, everybody. My name is Nathan Shaw. I am the youth pastor here at Crossroads. And whenever I tell people that, or for a long time when I told people that, they were very surprised. They were you look like a child. There's no way. It's just a child leading other children. There's no way this is good. You're lying, you're pulling my leg, whatever it might be. But then I changed things up, and I started talking to strangers in the line at grocery stores. And now people look at me and they're oh, you're in your mid-30s. They're perfect. You can be the youth pastor. That works out. But youth group is truly really going well. And we love having your kids. We love having them join us on Tuesday nights. If there's anybody out here and you are of youth age and you're not joining us, please come. We're in the middle of a really cool series called Wash, Rinse, Repeat, and we'll be continuing that this Tuesday. So come check it out. But I know that you're not really listening to that because you want to know how to look at the future, right? You want to know how to predict it. That's what you're wondering. How can we tell the future? And I think that's a very good question because it happens to us all the time. We're doing it without even knowing how we are doing it. We look at the lives of people and we look at what happens in their lives and we say things like, I told you so. Or we look at someone's life and we say, man, you probably should have seen that coming. We watch the decisions that our friends and family and colleagues and peers make, and it's as if everybody can see where those choices are leading, except the people making those choices. And people do that to us as well. They drop hints to us. They say things like, are you sure that you can afford that? Or they ask questions like, are you sure that you want to date somebody who's regularly listening to Nickelback? And you're like, I don't know, maybe. I can't predict the future. And they're like, well, I'm predicting it right now, and this isn't going to go well for you, okay? And then somewhere down the line, you find yourself asking, how did I not see that coming? And your friends and family are like, yeah, we know, we told you. Or somewhere down the line, you find yourself singing those old Nickelback songs, and you're like, this is how you remind me, right? And it's just like it didn't go well, and everyone knew that it wouldn't, except you. So as we enter 2019, I want to teach you how to see the future, not just for other people, but how to see it for yourself. That way we don't need to fantasize about time traveling, because we've avoided those things that we want to go back and change in the first place. I want to teach you to see the future because I think that sometimes we do know. We see the signs. Our friends and family clue us in, and we're somewhat aware of our current life's trend. But we just look the other way. And then at some point we get to our destination and we act shocked and we act surprised and we say, I should have seen this coming. But we did see this coming. We just kind of ignored it. So the question becomes, how do we predict the future? How do we predict 2019, not only for others, but for ourselves? And how are people doing that for us already? And how are we doing that for other people already? And this is how. It's pretty simple. We take a look at our paths. Okay, we take a look at the path that we are on. I asked my mom recently about a time when she could see the direction that, she could see where my path was going. I'm like, when I was growing up, could you see my path and you could see where I was heading and it was heading in the wrong direction and you were worried about me, Mom? I was like, when was that? Think about a time. And she said, just one? Which was obviously a very good sign that she had ample things to choose from, and that was very encouraging for me to hear. And we chose through the multitude that she brought up. We talked about them and talked through them and laughed about them and reminisced about the bad times, I guess. I don't know. And here's one that she shared that we ended up choosing and focusing on. And it was a time when I was in college. I was in my senior year of college, and I was not whelmed. You can be overwhelmed, you can be underwhelmed, and neither is good. I was overwhelmed at this point, okay? I was not whelmed at all. And the reason being, I was doing a lot. I was doing way too much. And there were a lot of people cluing into me, trying to drop hints and clues to me, are you sure you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, sort of thing. So I was working 2 jobs, which is already quite a bit, okay? I was working here at the church, and then I was working at a place called Pro Sports, and I spent a lot of time at both of those places. But also it was my senior year of college, and that meant that I had to do something called the education core, which was 15 credit hours of just education classes that ends with a practicum, which is kind of like student teaching, it lasts a month instead of lasting 3 months. And so that was a lot as well. So I would go and I would go to school, and then I would come here or I would come to my job. So I didn't have a lot of time to do my homework, which there's a lot of. There's a lot of reading. I would go to my job and I would bring my textbooks with me, and I'd be reading, or I'd be reading before youth group here and things like that, just breaking out these giant books. And then all the while I was doing that, I also I went to my professor and I was like, I want to graduate next semester. And he's like, well, I'm looking, or this is my my advisor. He's like, I'm looking at your schedule, and they're like, you're already doing 15 full credit hours, and it's the education core. They're like, we don't recommend you do anything else. I'm like, no, I need to write my thesis this semester too, because I thought I could do it. Right? I'm like, I need to write my thesis right now as well. I'm like, I need to do that so that I can graduate next semester and do my student teaching. I'm like, I can't write my thesis during student teaching. And they're like, well, you can't write your thesis during the education core as well. And I said, are there any rules preventing it? And they said no. So I said, okay, I'll do research and methods as well, and I'll do that too. And they're like, and so they said, okay. So I chose to write my thesis as well. And so I became what my mom called a hermit, where whenever I was home, I went into our guest bedroom because there were no distractions there, and I just it became like a disaster zone. Like there were just papers and books everywhere, and my life was not easy. And my advisor said, are you sure you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, I think so. And then Pastor Rob was like, are you sure that you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, I think I could do it. He's like, you don't have to do as much here. And I'm like, no, I can do it. And then my mom's like, you really shouldn't be doing this. And I was like, no, I think I can do it. And life was it was quite challenging for a time. And I didn't listen to any of the people trying to clue me in on the direction that my life was headed and the path that I was heading, which was burnout. But I made it through. And I survived, and it was good. And the next semester, I did my student teaching, and then I graduated from college, and it was awesome. And then I became a first-year teacher. And you might have thought I had learned my lesson, but I didn't, because I didn't listen to anybody. So now I'm a first-year teacher, and in my job interview, I'm like, I just want to teach. I'm like, I don't really want to help with any of the extracurriculars, because I'm like, I do so much I do so much at my church already. And I'm like, and I'm a first-year teacher, and I'm like, I think I'd be overwhelmed if I had anything else to my plate. And so then 2 months in, they're like, so do you want to be the girls' basketball coach? And I was like, yeah, that'd be really cool. And once again, I found myself in a really not good place where my mom's like, you're becoming a zombie. But now I didn't live with her anymore. I was moved out. So I was able to avoid the guilt, I guess, or whatever she was throwing my way. So just every once in a while she'd be like, things aren't good. And then the people that I worked with are like, are you doing okay? You're doing a lot. And then my roommate was like, dude, you don't talk, you just lay on the floor and talk about how much work you have to do. He's like, I'm worried about you. And when I start, a surefire way to know that I'm overwhelmed is I start taking showers at night, because I have so much work to do in the morning. So that way I can just get up and get back to work. And so he's like, you're showering at night. He's like, I'm really worried about you. Because the path that I was on was leading to burnout, and everyone could see it except me, who's like, yeah, I can do that extra thing. I can do that other thing. I can add that to my plate, and I'll be okay. Because everyone could see the path that I was on except me. So by a raise of hand, I want to know, I'm not going to ask you are you burnt out right now or something? That's not where this is going. Is there anyone in here who's bad at navigating? You're bad with directions, you get lost all the time? There's 3 of us, okay, not a whole lot. I don't think that that's me, but I know people who that sometimes happens to, people who are bad at directions. These are the people who find new ways of getting lost, going to the same place every week. They're going to the same place, but they found a new way to get lost. They found a new place to go. And again, I'm not that person, but I have been lost before while trying to find an address. And here's what I think I've learned when I get lost. Being lost isn't something that just happens. You don't just suddenly go from unlost to lost. You don't just take one turn and you're immediately lost or something. Eventually you just kind of discover, oh my goodness, I'm lost. If it was just one line, then I could step off of the stage and I'm lost. I don't know where I am. But I'm like, oh no, I got lost. I better go back to where I was. And now I'm not lost. But that's not how getting lost works. You usually don't discover that you are lost until you are very, very lost, until you've taken a series of wrong turns, or you've been going in the wrong direction for a while, because there is no fine line between the states of being of lost and unlost. And I think that that's how we sometimes find ourselves in trouble as well. We get lost. We don't get physically lost, and I'm not even necessarily saying that we're lost souls. I mean that we don't always recognize what path we are on, and before long we are lost, or before long we are overwhelmed. Or before long, we are in a crumbling marriage. Or before long, we are talking about filing for bankruptcy. Or before long, we are battling addiction. Okay? Eventually, we find ourselves lost. But again, lost isn't a fine line. So by the time that you recognize you are there, you've been heading in that wrong direction for a while. And when you are lost, you immediately want to become unlost. You immediately want to get to your destination. But there's no immediate fix for that because you have to find your way back. And usually you have to find your way back the same way that you got to where you were before. And that means it takes maybe a similar amount of time to get back to where you want to be, to get back to where you were before. It takes as much time to get back as it did to get you to where you found that you were lost. Our personal problems are the same way. Personal problems, just like being lost, cannot immediately be fixed. You cannot immediately fix a marriage. You cannot immediately fix an addiction. There are things that we get fixed all the time. We get machines fixed, or computers, right? Like the printer in my hallway at school was fixed, and I called the IT guy. I was like, hey, this printer's not working, and I really need it. And he came and he fixed it, like within an afternoon, and he figured out what was wrong with it. The smoke detector at my apartment had been beeping for like 9 months because my roommate and I are lazy. And we both wanted the other person to do it. But also it was like in the storage room, so we didn't hear it that much. Eventually it stopped beeping, so I think it's fixed. I don't know. I didn't do it, but I'm sure we're safe. I'm sure we're okay, right? There are things that get fixed in our lives. But you and I, we can't just get fixed. That's not how we work. We're a lot more complex than that. Like when something hard happens, when something bad happens to us, we can maybe get better, but we don't go back to being the same. It's not like a computer where you can reset it and it goes back to factory settings. That's not how people work. There's this communicator who kind of talks about this concept. His name is Andy Stanley, and he says, computers have memory, but you have memories, okay? You aren't the same after you go through something like that. And there are a variety of ways that we can choose a path or a direction that will lead to us being lost. Okay, there's a lot of ways that we can do this. Maybe you choose to pursue a romantic interest, and they become your everything. And you start to ignore or abandon your friends and your family for just this person, and that person becomes your everything. Because we don't just choose people, we're choosing paths. Okay? Maybe you choose to find your identity in your job and being successful at your job, but you're missing out on your family and you're missing out on being there for them. Trust me, there's a lot of Hallmark movies that are about that, but it's also something that happens in real life. People do that, and they make those decisions. Maybe you're like a student, and you've started spending your time with a friend from school who encourages you to break your parents' rules because your parents they're just trying to control you. They're old. They don't get how things are now. Things are different now, right? And maybe there's other things. Maybe you have an unhealthy lifestyle or that's leading to your health going down a bad path. Or maybe you've got dangerous spending habits and now your finances are heading down a dangerous path. As I said, personal problems cannot just be fixed. But most personal problems like this can be avoided. There's enough pain in this life that cannot be avoided. So why would we want to create more pain and more hardship in our lives if we can avoid it, if it's unnecessary? Just like when driving, the goal is to direct our path so we don't end up lost. But I think that that's sometimes easier said than done, right? So at the core of this series, and at the core of this message in particular, I want to teach you a principle. Okay, and when I say principle, I know there's two types of principles that you probably learned about at school. Here's how I kept them separate. Here's how I learned is your principal is your pal. Okay, so that's the one, that's the school principle. I'm teaching you the other kind of principle. This is the fundamental truth principle, and that's what I want to talk about this morning. Okay, that's what I want to teach us. And I think sometimes principle is a big word, and we get a little bit confused about even what it means. A principle is not a rule or a law for you to follow. That is not what a principle is. That's not how a principle works. In fact, it actually works in reverse. Principles follow you. And now you're glad that I'm not talking about the school principle kind, okay? I'm talking about the fundamental truth kind, okay? Principles follow you. They're always there, okay? Wherever you go, there are principles. Principles are not something that you need to apply to your life because principles are already applying themselves to your life. Whether you like them or not, whether you know that they exist or not, principles are always there, applying themselves to your life. And that's because principles are not created. Principles already exist, okay? In fact, principles are actually discovered by people. They discover how the world works, and they're like, oh, this must be something that is happening all the time. And principles can be tested, okay, and proven true. And once you know that a principle exists, you can either leverage a principle to your benefit, or you can ignore a principle to your detriment. So here's the principle that we're going to talk about this morning. It's called the principle of the path, okay? And we've got it up here. It's in your life message notes, but if you don't have your life message notes, you can write it down. This is what I want you to remember this morning. Direction determines destination. Your direction determines your destination, okay? And you might be sitting here and you're like, this is why I drove in the snow? I drove in the snow for this? Like, this is so simple. Like, I know this because I'm an adult. I know this because I'm like over the age of 12. Like, I know that wherever I'm going, like whatever like direction I'm heading, that determines where I end up. And yeah, I think you do know it, and I know it, and we've known it for a long time. But for some reason, we like to ignore it. For some reason, we like to pretend it doesn't exist. Okay? I discovered that when I was in college, and I was like, I can do it all, and I will mentally be okay. I chose a direction. I chose a path, and it ended up really like hurting me. Like my mental health wasn't good during that time period. I was always overwhelmed. I was always frustrated, okay? Because we like to pretend it doesn't exist. We try to ignore it, or we act oblivious to this concept, or we try to skirt around it. And that's because once you know this, it isn't easy to know what to do about it. And we like easy, so it's easier to just ignore it. It's easier to pretend like it doesn't exist. I see my students doing this all the time. Not obviously my youth students. I don't see them do it. I mean my school students, of course, because my school students aren't here, so I can talk about them. I see them doing this all the time, where they know that the person that they're starting to hang out with is not a good influence, and I can see their behavior change, and I can see who they become change. Or maybe it's not even like the person that they're choosing. They're like, I can listen to this kind of music, and I can watch these kinds of shows, and I can play these kinds of video games, and it won't affect me, and it won't affect my path. And I hear them talking about these things. I'm like, are you sure that that's what you want to be filling yourself with? And they're like, yeah, it doesn't affect me. And I'm like, well, I've been teaching here for 2 years now, and I can see that you've changed. I can see that who you are is changing because you're choosing a path. You're choosing a direction, okay? And then sometimes if you ignore this principle and you're a student, you end up encountering the principal, and it's not good. And then the principal is sharing those same things with these students that I'm sharing. But when you leave the principal's office, sometimes you're like crying and you're sadder because you have consequences, where I'm a lot nicer than her. So I think the best example of this just happened like a couple weeks ago, where like our vending machine broke at school. And one of our students discovered that it was broken and discovered that the vending machine was just kicking out money, which is pretty cool. Like, get rich now, get rich just during school. And so he started telling all of his friends, he's like, you put in $1, give change, and that's kicking out like $3 and a soda. I don't know exactly how it was working, but the students were getting like very wealthy off of our vending machine. And no one wanted to obviously tell a teacher or a faculty member at all. They just wanted to get rich and get a lot of caffeine. And so like I watched the cameras, and I saw who discovered this little secret, and I can watch on the cameras as he chooses the path. He like discovers the secret. He's got money, he's got soda, and I see him choose the path of going and telling everybody else. And then I watch them walk up to the vending machine. I'm just sitting here like watching the cameras, and I'm watching them all choose a path. and it's not a good one. And they all served their detention on Friday. They got to serve it after Christmas break because this happened right before the break. And I'm watching all of them, and I'm like, man, like they've chosen a path, and the consequences have arrived now. Now, this was a very short path. This path took like one afternoon. But we're going to talk about how sometimes the paths that we take cost us a lot more than an afternoon. So we're hearing this, and we're hearing that our direction determines our destination, and we're discovering this principle and how it's applying itself to our lives, whether we like it or not. And the question, I think, becomes, what do we do about it? Like, if we're choosing to ignore it, if it's hard to know what to do about it, then what's the solution? And lucky for you guys, and lucky for me, someone way, way, way smarter than me. There's a lot of people smarter than me, but this is someone who's like way, way, way smarter than me. Figured it out a long time ago, like 2,000 years ago. He had the answer, and he shared it with us. And it's a guy named Jesus. You may have heard of him. If you haven't, you can research him, and he's really cool. And you'll love his story. It's a really amazing story. But he knew this principle, and he knew how to use it to his advantage, and he let us in on the secret. And because he's way smarter than us, he decided to break it down for us in a story. He told it as a story, that way he could help us understand it. So he told a story about two guys who wanted to do some construction. So I immediately know this story is not about me, because they want to do construction. I like to tell people, I'm like, I work with my stepdad and I do construction and we work on cars and stuff. And what I really mean by that is I hand him tools and he tells me I handed him the wrong tool. And then I try again and I mess up again, but eventually I get it. And then I always say, his name's Dave, but I call him DZ. I'm like, DZ, can we listen to music? And he's like, no. And then an hour later, I'm like, DZ, can we listen to music? And he's like, no, it's distracting. And that's how I do construction. So the story's not about me. It's about people much more qualified than myself, okay? And they want to do some construction. And so this is a story from the Sermon on the Mount. This was a sermon that Jesus gave. He told a lot of stories. He told a lot of principles, and he provided a lot of wisdom. And in this particular story, there's two men. One of them is wise, and one of them is foolish. And they want to build their houses. They're deciding that they want to build their houses. And Jesus goes from wise to foolish, when he tells the story, but we're gonna go in reverse. We're gonna start with the foolish man, okay? The foolish man seems to have a loose understanding of construction, or he's lazy. We don't really know what exactly it is, maybe a combination of the two. But the foolish man, he's going to build his house, and he chooses to build it on the sand. That's what he decides to do. And when Jesus is telling this story, you know that a lot of the crowd, they have a better understanding of construction than I do. They do more than just hand the wrong tools to people. And you can imagine they're all just oh no, what is he doing? Why is this foolish man doing this? Why is he building his house on the sand? You don't need to tell us, you don't need to call him the foolish man, Jesus. We already know. He's choosing to build his house on this sand. So they're shaking their heads at this, and they know it's not going to go well. And I think that's kind of us, when we see people in our lives making poor decisions, we're oh no, your life is heading in the wrong direction. Jesus doesn't even have to call you foolish. I'll do it. What are you doing? Okay? When your life's heading in that direction and you're starting to feel those consequences, you can go to your pastor, you can go to your therapist, you can go to your mom, your dad, your counselor, your coach, your doctor, and you can ask, how do I fix it? You can ask, how do I fix my marriage? How do I fix my addiction, my finances, my health, my lifestyle, my friendship, my grades, my isolation? How do I fix my parenting? You can go and you can ask that. But whatever the case is, there isn't an immediate fix, as we've talked about. There is no immediate fix to that. Actually, what needs to change is your direction. Right? Your path needs to change. And you and I know that because we've been talking about it for the last few minutes. But the people in the story, they don't really realize this yet, because that's what Jesus is getting at, okay? Because you can head in the direction without even noticing it. You can be living in the wrong direction and be totally happy and totally content for a while, because the consequences haven't set in yet. Think about the foolish man building his house on the sand. He can build a very nice house, and he can be very happy with his house. He can do everything right in his house. He can have all of the amenities. He can have he can have, I don't even know like what amenities they would have had like during that time period. It could be very nice though. I don't know what people did for fun back in Jesus' time, but it could be this amazing house. The construction could be perfect, but if he built it on the sand, when the consequences set in, he's going to pay the price, okay? Think about the foolish man building his house on the sand. When do his consequences set in? If you know the song, then you know when they set in. It's when the rains come down and the floods come up, right? That's when the consequences set in. And his entire house gets washed away, okay? Everything that was good, everything that he enjoyed, everything that he had done right, he built his house on the sand, so it all gets washed away. And if he goes to somebody, he goes to his friend, he goes to his coach, he goes to his doctor, he goes to his pastor, his therapist, and he's like, help me fix this. We need to fix my house. They're going to be like, what house? It's gone. It's been washed away. And he's like, we just need to build it the way it was. I liked it the way it was. If they're a good friend, are they going to do that? You can answer. It's okay. Are they going to do that if they're a good friend? Are they going to help him build his house the way it was? No. No, they're not going to help him build the house the way that it was before, because his direction needs to change. His path needs to change. They're going to be like, we need to do it the right way this time. If they're a good friend, they're going to set him on the right direction toward the right destination. If you change your direction, things will eventually change. It's up to you if it's good or bad, right? But a change of direction means a change of destination every single time. And we get to where we should be sometimes the same way we got to where we shouldn't be, okay? And the foolish man is going to learn that if he chooses to build his house the right way the next time. We want to be living in the right direction. We want to be like the wise man who built his house on the rocks. When the crowd listening to Jesus, when they heard that, they knew that it was good. They knew that it was going to be harder. They knew it was going to take more time and effort, and they would be difficult and strenuous. But they also knew that this man and the work that he was doing was going to be worth it because he had a good foundation. When Jesus is telling this story, this represents having a direction or a path that is leading toward Jesus. This represents allowing Jesus' teaching, Jesus' principles, Jesus' parables to be your foundation. When the rains come down and the floods come up, the wise man's house remained standing. This path is how we avoid the unnecessary hurt in our lives. We're going to read what Jesus said word for word now. We're in Matthew chapter 7, and this is how it starts. All who listen to my instructions and follow them are wise, like a man who builds his house on solid rock. What makes somebody wise? Someone who's wise, they see the connections in life. They recognize that everything in life is connected and that when you're doing something over here, it might affect what's happening over here. They see the cause and effect within life. And they recognize that there aren't quick fixes and answers to problems. Wise people apply what Jesus teaches, and wise people accept Jesus' invitation to live in a different direction. Though the rain comes in torrents, and the floods rise, and the storm winds beat against his house, it will not collapse, for it is built on rock. But those who hear my instructions and ignore them are foolish, like a man who builds his house on sand. What makes somebody foolish? They ignore the connections in life. They pretend that cause and effect do not exist. They live life as if they can just reboot and everything will be okay. And if someone gets hurt in the process, they'll get over it. Or if they don't get over it, they can be replaced. There's more people out there. This is like the woman who comes into work and she's got a new haircut, she's got a new color or something, and you're like, oh man, like she's going through something. So you ask her about it, and she's like, no, it's okay. I changed my hair and I've changed my friends. And you're like, oh no, like this isn't going to fix it. Okay, you can't just reset. That's not how people work. For when the rains and floods come and storm winds beat against his house, it will fall with a mighty crash. The crowds were amazed at Jesus' sermons, for he taught as one who had great authority and not as their Jewish leaders. Jesus didn't teach this message to be harsh or to hurt the people listening. He taught this message because life is harsh and life can hurt the people listening. Jesus taught this message because he loves us and he can see the direction that our lives are heading. When we are driving and we get lost trying to find an address, it's really frustrating. We can lose 15 minutes. We can miss the previews before a movie, which I really don't like to do. I like to see them. We can arrive fashionably late to a party. But when we live life in the wrong direction, we can get lost. And we can get lost for a month. We can get lost for a season. We can lose our 2018 or our 2019. We can lose our marriage. We can miss our kids' childhoods. We can lose our health or our finances. We can miss our 20s or our 30s or our 60s. That is what getting lost can do. The stakes are a lot higher when we end up on the wrong path in life than when we end up on the wrong path while driving. But Jesus loves us, and we are precious to him. And therefore, he invites us to live differently than the world. He invites us to make a choice. Make a choice. And that's my challenge to you this morning, is to make a choice. Make a choice to change your path. Okay? And for each of us, I think that choice is going to look totally different because our lives and our circumstances are unique, and the paths that we're on right now are unique. Okay? So my challenge to all of us is one day to make a choice and to stick with it, because we can see where our 2019 is going. We can predict it, okay? We can predict our own lives too, not just the lives of others. So what is your choice going to be this morning? Maybe you're like unsure about Jesus. This is the first time you've ever heard about him this morning. And maybe your choice would just be to come back next week and see if like his path is one that you even want to be on. Okay, it's a big decision to choose to build your life on something. And I know it's not to be taken lightly. So maybe just come back next week and hear what our communicators have to say. Like we said earlier, you're not just choosing a person, you're choosing a path. And choosing Jesus is a path. Maybe the path that you're on you're not in a good relationship right now and you need to end a relationship. Maybe Jesus has laid something on your heart and he's like, start this, do it. And you've been saying, no, I'm not sure, I'm scared. And your choice is to do it and to see where that path that Jesus has for you will take you. Maybe you've got a behavior or an activity that you're keeping a secret and you're ashamed about, and maybe the path is to confess that and to repent of it and go another way. I don't know what it is for you, but I know that each and every one of us, we have a choice to make. So let's make a choice. And I'm going to build on this as well. And I want to ask you this. Would you be so bold as to ask somebody close to you, somebody that you can trust, what path am I on? Because sometimes other people do have better perspective than we do. Our heart gets in the way and we start to justify things or we start to believe things and we can't see what path we're on. So maybe ask somebody, if you don't know, ask somebody, what path am I on? Somebody who you trust. And if you're in here and you do get asked, be so bold as to answer honestly, because it's hard to ask and they're putting themselves out there. And I want you to remember this in the coming weeks of this series. You're going to hear this every morning, and I want us to remember it and take it to heart. It's the final slide. The best way to predict your future is to pay attention to what path you are on. You will always end up where the path you're on takes you. The direction we choose has a lot to do with the destination that we arrive at. And that is how we will know where our 2019 is going. And I'm super lucky that I get to go through this year and be on this path with you guys. Is it all right if we pray? Cool, I'm going to do it. Dear Jesus, thank you for this morning. Thank you for everyone that made it here safely. And thank you that I get to go on this journey with them and that we have chosen a path to be here and to learn more about you and to be in relationship and community with each other. I pray that we can begin to build our foundations on you, Jesus, and that you can be the rock that we build our homes upon, because when the hard times in life come, which we know that they will, our house will still stand because we have you beside us, guiding us and strengthening us, Jesus. I pray that we can be bold and tell others that we love and care about and help them see the paths that they are on as well, so that we can all be on this path and journey together. In your name we pray, Jesus.